Se me ha acabado el presupuesto para dubstep y partículas, así que aquí la tenéis, la intro de Necro for Fun.
El puto amo.
Campfire de Diablo 4. Hemos tenido un parche de inicio de temporada bastante duro. Vamos a ver qué nos cuenta la gente de Blizzard. He subido el volumen al stream, ergo lo subí a vosotros. Bajito.
But I cannot do this alone. My allies have fallen. My strength is dwindling. The malignant are relentless and without mercy. I need help. I need you.
I need you. Qué majo, Luisa. Luisa, te queremos.
Hello, Diablo community. Welcome to another Diablo 4 Campfire chat. My name is Adam Fletcher. I am the Associate Director of Community here for Diablo. I'm joined here by Joe Shelley, Game Director of Diablo 4, and Mr. Joe Paipora, the Associate Game Director for Diablo 4.
Paipora es el que organiza los parches pensando en la vida a largo plazo del juego.
We have this Campfire chat because we do want to talk about the patch that just released this past week, which is patch 1.10. We've seen a ton of feedback. We've heard a lot of feedback. And so we do want to go through, you know, a lot of the points of feedback that we've been hearing and at the same time the patch itself. The biggest thing that, you know, to kind of like kick us off here, I think we want to, you know, obviously acknowledge everyone's feedback in regards to reducing player power. We know it is bad. We know it is not
Para quien no tenga nivel de inglés, el motivo de este Campfire es que saben que la comunidad no está contenta con la bajada de poder de los jugadores. La bajada de poder tanto a nivel defensivo como a nivel ofensivo. Y vienen a contarnos un poco por qué esa bajada de poder. ¿Por qué han acabado haciendo eso en ese parche?
And then of course we also want to talk about like what we were trying to achieve specifically with this patch and with the changes that players ended up seeing. And then separately, we do want to also talk about how we don't plan on doing a patch like this ever again.
Y que tiene intención de no volver a repetir este tipo de parches con nerfeos tan bruscos.
Talk a little bit about, you know, our philosophy, our own internal statements that we're setting for ourselves for future updates for the game itself. And then, of course, we do want to also talk about how we can talk better and communicate with the community better in regards to patches and updates coming to the game.
Dice que quieren intentar tener mejor feedback con la comunidad, una charla más fluida, para que podamos hablar con la comunidad sobre futuros parches y que esto no pase de nuevo, que expliquen por qué quieren hacer lo que quieren hacer, que hablen un poco de las intenciones y que este tipo de parches tan mal recibidos no pasen de nuevo.
And part of that is ensuring that the
vale, ya sé por dónde va a tirar.
got a place in the meta experience, and that kind of goes to some of the changes we made in 1.1. Now, Adam already called out that we've heard the feedback with regard to the patch, and we know that reducing player power is never a good experience in general.
Dice, sabemos que no es una buena experiencia que os bajemos el poder de los personajes, pero creemos que Diablo 4 tiene que ser un juego de elecciones, de diversas elecciones, y cuando algo está muy por encima del resto, no te da alternativas.
First, really, I guess to cooldown reduction. We changed the amount of CDR that players can get as part of in the affix ranges and items that are rolling for them.
Dice cooldown reduction, hemos bajado un 75% el cooldown reduction. Si no es el atributo más fuerte, es de los más fuertes del juego.
The reason for it is obvious. When you're able to get CDR to a certain point and using certain class mechanisms, you're able to get effectively like instantaneous like active skills. So, like, you know, that can give you like unlimited resource, can give you unlimited movement.
Dice, claro, esto nos da un problema y es que lo podéis aplicar de tal manera de conseguir recurso infinito, habilidades activas infinitas. Os quita la posibilidad de optar por otras opciones porque es demasiado bueno lo que os aporta el cooldown reduction. Dice que no es divertido y que es un gran problema el hecho de que no haya alternativas, de que sí o sí tienes que ver ese atributo porque es demasiado bueno.
We think that these builds are very prevalent at the moment is based upon like the nature of some of the endgame content we have in Diablo 4. In particular, thinking about Nightmare Dungeons, especially. The reality is that Nightmare Dungeons are dramatically overtuned from where they actually need to be, based upon the place they fill in the role they fill in the game itself. So tier
usa una palabra que no conozco, overtune.
Excruciatingly difficult for most players to, most classes to be able to actually get through. And as a result, it begins to kind of winnow the opportunities and options that players have when they begin to engage with content at that tier. Such that you really do require, you need to lean on very, very specific builds, very specific setups. You know, with access to things like instantaneous cooldowns for some skills.
Dice que tiene un problema con los temas de los sigilos y las mazmorras potenciadas, y es que están muy overtuned respecto al resto del contenido. Ah, vale, que están como muy... que son demasiado rentables. Dice, entonces se usan para todo, las usan para levear glifos, para ganar experiencia, para conseguir únicos, para conseguir legendarios. Es la mejor opción para absolutamente todo. Sé lo que quieres hacer, los sigilos te lo dan todo. Y eclipsa el resto.
And we feel like we have done a reasonably good job of that with Uber Lilith in the game, but we don't feel that like tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons fulfill the same role at all.
Sí, claro. No tenemos la sensación de que matar Uber Lilith y completar un sigilo 100 esté equilibrado. Como que no te damos razones para hacer un sigilo 100. Y dice que van a reajustar la Nightmare Dungeon para que hacer una Nightmare Dungeon nivel 100 sea factible. Dice, claro, es que tenéis la sensación de que un sigilo 71 100 son iguales, porque no hay una sensación de progresión de dificultad ni nada, es la misma sensación de one shot con determinadas builds.
We are going to be looking at creating a new content type, a new endgame content type that's going to be more directly meant to address those sorts of players and give people more things to chase. That's part of the commitment to the live service.
Y dice que sí, que uno de sus objetivos internos es darnos más alternativas, más elecciones a nivel de endgame. Que no sintamos que el endgame es o matar Uber Lily o hacer sigilos 100 y fin.
That's another really big thing. Next, we made a number of changes to the to sorceress skill, like sorceress builds in general.
¿Magos?
That sort of ended up having a net impact of like really reducing their effectiveness with some of their most powerful builds at the moment.
Dice, hemos bajado bastante el impacto de algunas de las builds más fuertes del mago, porque llega un momento en que vamos a empezar a subir el resto de cosas y hay algunas que destacaban demasiado. Entonces no daba el margen a cambiar de build. Y repite eso de que Diablo 4 es un juego de elecciones donde tú vas a decidir qué quieres jugar y de qué manera lo quieres hacer, y si no hay un buen balance eso no puede pasar. Y dice, sí, hay algunas builds que van a destacar, que una vez que las montas, sus interacciones, su concepto es mejor que otro, es más útil. Dice, esto es cómo nos planteamos nosotros los goals, los objetivos del juego, el balance. No podemos hacer
the way that players are going to feel about those things who are playing those classes. Like if our goal is to create an ultimately balanced experience, without regard for how much fun the player's having as part of the.
Sí, su objetivo es que el endgame esté balanceado, que cuando vayas a hacer el contenido en high-end puedas elegir entre varias opciones. Pero no se puede hacer sin un cambio conceptual, porque hay determinadas mecánicas que son mejores que otras.
Another bit that speaks to this is the change that was made for vulnerable damage. Now, I think that
vale, cambios al daño vulnerable.
Players in the community who like kind of dove deep into a lot of our systems in Diablo 4 and kind of see that vulnerable damage is a really outside.
Hay jugadores que han llegado muy al fondo de cómo hemos pensado y cómo hemos diseñado esto y han descubierto que el daño vulnerable es mucho más rentable que todo lo demás.
Creatures sort of need to be vulnerable in order for you to feel that you need to that you can damage them. This is something that we're very aware of, and we made a reduction as part of the 1.1 build that reduced player damage in general, because most players rely on many builds, I should say,
Hay muchas builds que se basan en el daño a enemigos vulnerables. Le aplicas el estado vulnerable de una forma relativamente fácil y puedes sacar números muy altos. Y esto es algo de lo que tenemos que hablar. El daño vulnerable en general es mucho más potente de lo que queríamos que fuera, en general. Y necesitamos alinearlo con otros tipos de daño.
Bonus damage to vulnerable creatures number and reduce it by 40% in terms of the the amount of damage you can get across different sources, and have that be the way that we solve this problem. Really, I think we all know that the ultimate problem with damage to vulnerable creatures, the fact is multiplicative stacking on top of the base vulnerable damage, which is.
Y el problema que tenemos con el daño vulnerable es porque a estas alturas ya sabéis que es el único tipo de daño que es multiplicativo. Entonces cuando lo stackeas, el multiplicador es mucho más alto que otras cosas. No se arregla con algo tan sencillo como bajar un 40%.
And the availability of these things across various builds. There's lots of builds that rely on vulnerable, and they're balanced around the idea that the damage is also multiplicative. So a number of their balance and tuning changes will need to be made in order to be able to bring vulnerable back in line with some of the other options we have out there.
Sí, claro. Nosotros creemos que con el balance, de alguna manera, se puede poner en línea con otros tipos de opciones para hacer daño.
We want to start trying to be a little more inclusive of all of these decisions when we begin considering which of these balance adjustments we want to make.
Por una parte, tampoco queremos ser tan bruscos de no incluiros en esta toma de decisiones. Queremos incluiros en esta toma de decisiones. Pero tenemos una idea de cómo creemos que este tipo de gameplay tiene que ser. Y parche a parche queremos ver cómo mejoramos este balance. Y que los inicios de temporada son una oportunidad para probar nuevos balances. Para ver qué impacto tiene el juego, en las builds, en el balance de los personajes.
So I know that Joe, you're going to talk about some of these things in a minute. So this is an awkward handoff, but I just want to make it right. It's a very awkward handoff. Okay. I'm sorry, but I want people to understand that we do hear the things that they're saying. We do plan on making changes in the near future, and just kind of thinking philosophically about how we want to do these things moving forward. And with that, I guess Joe, would you like to chat about your thinking?
Va a dejar que nos lo cuente él, pero que planean hacer más cambios a futuro.
A great lead in here. We want, as Adam mentioned, we want to talk about. We kind of talked a little bit about how we got here. We want to talk about what we're going to do about that. I mean, I think one of the really good points.
Vamos a hablar de por qué estamos aquí y qué vamos a hacer en consecuencia por qué estamos aquí.
Vulnerable is, for example, vulnerable is like a must-take stat, right? And it would be better if it wasn't a must.
Sí, dice que el daño vulnerable, y ya está confirmado, es la cosa más rentable que se puede pillar. Si lo pillas, es como lo que más números te va a dar. A usar la palabra regardless.
So I want to talk about our mission statement for the live game, and I think we have yeah, perfect. So there are four parts to this. We're going to start with the first part.
Dice que sí, que su idea a futuro está dividida en 4 partes, y esta es una de ellas. Que haya una variedad sana de builds para descubrir, para usar juntas, para optimizar, para usar en las 5 clases.
And to optimize across all 5 of our classes. Second point.
Nuevos ítems y poderes que refresquen el gameplay e incrementen la variedad de builds. Que no juguemos lo mismo, que los nuevos poderes cambien drásticamente.
The live game should also have continually evolving endgame content.
El juego tiene que estar evolucionando, tiene que añadirse con nueva densidad de bichos, nuevo contenido de endgame. Y nuevas formas de retar a tu build. Y luego hacer el juego divertido, cosa que no pasa por llevar las mismas 3 builds todas las seasons.
I'll get to the fourth point in a second. While Nightmare Dungeons are technically challenging your build, they're challenging your build in some ways that are not very fun, right?
Sí. Dice, las Dungeon de Nightmare, las Dungeon de pesadillas están retando a tu build, pero lo hacen de una forma que no es divertida. Sobre todo cuando llegas a niveles muy altos, llega un momento que no es divertido, porque no es skilled, no es cuestión de números.
the Nightmare Dungeon system is doing particularly well right now in terms of making challenging content.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's so important, your call out that we plan to introduce additional content that fulfills that part of the mission statement to challenge your builds.
Dice, claro, para retar a tu build vamos a meter nuevo contenido y nos parece muy importante que no sea solo las Nightmare Dungeon lo único que rete a tu build.
And of course, ultimately what we're trying to do is make the game more fun for players, right? Players are at the heart of everything that we're doing. And if the game is not more fun for players, and we're not making the game, if players can't believe that as the game evolves, it will get more fun, then we're not accomplishing our goals.
Sí, claro, si los jugadores no entienden, no comprenden, no piensan que según el juego vaya evolucionando va a ser mejor y va a tener más diversión, nos estamos equivocando.
How do we make sure that the next time we do a patch, we don't have
Venga, vamos por partes. ¿Cómo nos vamos a asegurar de que esto no pase de nuevo, de que el próximo parche nos genere esta reacción?
We call it a key process improvement. That's like a weird jargon term. A change that we're making that will help us avoid this situation.
Venga,
so I think we have
¿qué cambios vamos a hacer para evitar que esta situación se repita?
When we make, and this goes again, this is right along what you were saying here. We make changes to increase build diversity. Our goal, going back to the mission statement, is we want to have a wide variety of viable builds, right?
Venga.
So when we make changes that have the ultimate aim of increasing build diversity, we need to pair those changes with compelling alternatives.
Dice, cuando hacemos cambios para incrementar la diversidad de las builds, vamos a dejar que algunas builds estén muy por encima de las otras mientras le damos alternativas competitivas. En plan, te dejo que Lanza de Huesos sea la más competitiva, pero mientras tanto me aseguro de que poco a poco aparezcan alternativas válidas.
That until we have created those other options and redesigned things around the nature of these and made sure that we've lifted up.
Claro, es que tampoco podemos dejar que una build destaque demasiado hasta que tenemos alternativas, porque entonces ya como que lo opaca todo.
Extraordinary outliers, you know, that we're going to want. They're usually relying on like actual bugs that we need to address. But when it comes to like trying to bring things back in line with one another, we want to be able to make sure that we're doing those when we make those decisions. We have a bevy of other options and alternatives available for players to engage with at the same time. So if players see us taking like a toy away, that we're giving lots of other toys or lifting up other toys, you know, to make them more viable as part of the exchange.
Yeah, and that those toys are equally exciting.
Yes.
So let's go to the second point of this here.
Segundo punto.
When we make changes like this, it's important for us to make them at predictable times, and Adam's going to talk a little bit more about it.
Cuando vayan a meter un parche que vaya a suponer un cambio de meta, va a ser algo predecible. Vamos a saber que no mañana te van a cambiar la build porque patata. No. Antes de cada temporada va a haber un parche de balance y tú puedes saber exactamente cada cuánto tiempo te van a joder las builds o te las van a potenciar. Quieren que sea algo predecible, que no vayas con el miedo en el cuerpo de cuándo te va a pasar esto. A no ser que aparezca un bug o un mal funcionamiento de una build que rompa el juego, que entonces van a meter un hotfix instantáneo. Siempre y cuando se cargue el juego o provoque crasheos o provoque problemas de muy gordos, entonces van a hacer un hotfix. Si no, solo a inicio de temporada vamos a tener parche. Que yo entiendo que eso significa que hasta dentro de 3 meses este parche se queda como está.
And I think, you know, one of the things that's important for to recognize and state is that ultimately ARPGs, or some people call them hack and slash games, are about power fantasy, right? And they're about us inviting players to break the game to some extent.
Sí.
Not to crash.
Dice, a ver, este tipo de juegos que los jugadores llaman hack and slash, es retar al jugador a que rompa los niveles de poder y nos enseñe y encuentren formas de romper los niveles de poder.
Do crazy things with them, and we need to make sure that we aren't trying to punish players for doing that, like, because ultimately that's the playground we built. That's like.
Dice, pero podéis estar tranquilos, no vamos a castigar a jugadores por encontrar cosas locas que rompan el juego. Es precisamente lo que os estamos retando. No vamos a castigar a alguien por encontrar una forma de romper el juego.
were talking about at least the Nightmare Dungeon stuff beforehand, and we can go into it in a little bit more detail once we get to the stuff that might be coming down the pipe here. The one thing I think that I wanted to really highlight on was, obviously we did this patch and we made these changes and we brought character power down, player power down essentially. That in itself was also supposed to be paired with these Nightmare Dungeon changes that where Joe was actually talking about earlier, and it's something that we've learned throughout this process, is, as you guys were talking about, that we have ultimate visions for something.
Sí, a ver, tenemos una visión a largo plazo de lo que queremos, pero estamos aprendiendo de estos parches, de cómo aplicarlos, de cómo de bruscos o de poco a poco tenemos que ir. Sabemos que queremos una mejor experiencia, sabemos en qué consiste esa mejor experiencia, pero que es el proceso lo estamos aprendiendo.
Of course, a key component to this is how we communicate to players, and there is been a lot of feedback in regards to hey, it would have been great if we knew some of these changes were coming down the pipe, and it's a hefty amount of patch notes. We could have digested this over a few days.
Una cosa que le han estado diciendo en el feedback y que
one thing we do want to commit to right now is that we do plan on going forward always providing patch notes and communicating these patch notes through streams like this, through Campfire chats.
Dice que una de las cosas que les han dicho es, nos lo has dicho tan cerca y tan de sopetón que nos hemos puesto nerviosos y nos ha dado un poco de que podías darnos las notas con más antelación para que nos dé tiempo a digerirlas y a asimilar lo que nos estás diciendo. Dice que sí, que van a hacer Campfire para presentar posibles futuros parches. Esta gente no juega Diablo 3 en su puta vida.
But I will say we do plan on sharing those no matter what to the community going forward, and from here on out through a stream or
dice que sí, que harán streams para comunicarnos las futuras notas de parche, para pedirnos permiso para meter los parches. No me jodas. Dice, claro, sí, por una parte recibo feedback y por otra parte os da tiempo de digerir las notas de parche.
That we do want to talk about here really quickly, but one thing that we will commit to right now is that next Friday, so exactly 1 week from now, we'll be back on a live stream, because we will start with that live stream where we will be talking about our next patch that will be coming to Diablo 4. We'll talk a little bit about some of the details.
Vale, viernes que viene van a hacer otro live stream para hablarnos del próximo parche de Diablo 4.
But we will be back on here to kind of go through the whole entire patch notes with everyone.
Que nos van a traer todas las notas de parche para que le echemos un vistazo.
Of what they're going to be seeing in the actual update, and they can talk to us through chat, through devs, or through social media, through Reddit, through our forums.
Y que a través de social media, chats, forums, etcétera, podemos comunicarnos con ellos con el feedback sobre lo que nos enseñan.
And remind everyone, of course, throughout the week that we will have another Campfire chat to talk about patch 111, since we just shipped 111, but we do want to talk a little bit about patch 111. Today, just because there are some items that we are aware of that we know will be of interest to players, specifically when it comes to things that they've been asking for, and at least it gives you guys a little bit of an early preview of some stuff that's coming down the road. I think
que hay algunos ítems que tienen preparados, algunas cosas que pueden enseñarnos,
as of late, from
de las que quieren que hablemos.
Sorcerer and barbarian items and stuff like that. And,
ítems para mago, ítems para bárbaro.
Obviously tuned a lot of classes down, and there's questions of like, hey.
Dice que ahora mismo hay determinadas clases que están por debajo del resto y que también van a comentar formas de volver a devolverlos al nivel.
And barbarian aspects aren't being utilized very well right now, and trying to lift a lot of those back up. So there's going to be a wide range of legendary power and unique item improvements for these two classes in particular.
Sí, se vienen muchos cambios para Sorcerer y para Bárbaro para volver a devolverles un poquito de poder.
And then also getting a lot of barbarian updates in there at the same time. And this is for 1.1.1.
Correct.
So the very next patch and cycle.
Yeah, and
y que esto va a ser para el próximo parche.
We're having a live stream now next Friday. We expect that patch here in the next like couple weeks or so. So at least you guys can.
¿Me lo estás diciendo en serio? Me cago en tu puto muerto.
And on that Friday, we'll be talking a lot about.
Dice que el próximo viernes nos cuentan el parche, nos lo explican, nos lo desarrollan y que en el plazo de 2 semanas lo tenemos. Que sí que nos van a meter otro parche de balance ahora, inicio de temporada, para cambiar al mago y al bárbaro mínimo. Tronco.
That's actually we're planning on actually rolling that out in a hotfix specifically.
Van a meter un hotfix con el parche.
Rolling out later today, so we'll have more information on the Nightmare Dungeon changes that will be that we talked about earlier. That will be coming out later today via hotfix.
Que también nos van a sacar un hotfix para cambiar cosas en las Nightmare Dungeons hoy.
We've toned it down. And now we're kind of, and we had mentioned that to players that we did plan on bringing it back up. It is monster density in Nightmare Dungeon.
Que se ha bajado la densidad en algunas Nightmare Dungeon y que pretenden volver a aumentar la densidad en las Nightmare Dungeons.
Yeah, so, I mean, going back to the mission statement I mentioned earlier, a key part of the live game is having high density areas for players to mow down, right?
Necesitamos que haya zonas con mucha densidad.
Of which Diablo 4 is one.
That's true.
Pardon my grammar. And so we're going to be increasing the density in Nightmare Dungeons substantially. And we're going to be increasing the density in Helltide as well.
Van a subir mucho la densidad en
the Nightmare Dungeon changes
Mareas de Sangre y de Nightmare Dungeons.
All Nightmare Dungeons will get more dense.
Que todas las Nightmare Dungeons van a tener más densidad.
There are certain areas of Helltide that are
y que en Helltide hay zonas que están medio muertas y que las van a corregir.
Areas like that probably won't get more dense, and part of what we've been doing here at the same time in terms of these density changes is making sure that we're making performance improvements, like looking at player skills that are taking a lot of time on the servers, getting those into better performance. So players have better frame rates and stuff, and fewer stalls, and all these kinds of things that make the game more fun to play. And this also helps us increase the number of more monsters, more players, more stuff going on. And we know that the density,
dice que la densidad, el aumento de monstruos hace que tengas que tener más habilidades, que tengas como más cosas pasando de golpe y que también se traduce como más diversión y que van a aumentar la densidad en Helltide. Dice que ahora mismo la densidad en las mareas de sangre no es uniforme, que van a intentar que sea un poquito más uniforme y que las zonas más vacías estén más llenas. Y en las dungeons bastante. Y que eso va a venir en el parche o en el hotfix de hoy en el de dentro de 2 semanas. Creo que he dicho en el de hoy.
Gems and so forth actually becoming materials in season 2, which to help out with some inventory concerns specifically. I know you guys have information at least in regards to stash and what might be coming in 1.1.1.
Yes, so certainly the gem change is still coming in season 2, like you said.
Dice que la temporada 2, dentro de 3 meses, vamos a tener el cambio del stash de gemas, pero que también necesitamos más cosas para el stash. Ahora.
In 1.1.1, we're going to be adding an additional stash tab.
Dice que nos van a sumar un stash tab en el parche 1.1.1. Que no sé si es el de dentro de 2 semanas, creo que sí. ¿Más un stash, gente?
Inside the dev team of like, do we feel that we're ready to do this yet? Do we feel that we're ready to do this yet? Like the density conversation, the stash tab conversation, like the engineering team's been working really, really hard to be able to like make these adjustments possible for us. Like there's more that we're doing. This is now a never-ending conversation of like what else can we do and what else can we be doing to try to improve the experience. But like we've definitely heard these 2 concerns and we're just really happy to be able to bring them in as early as
Dice que le han pedido mucho con el feedback que hay un stash específico para gemas y un stash específico más grande para el stash tab y que las 2 cosas las han oído y están trabajando en ello. El de gemas viene en Season 2 y el de espacio viene en el parche 1.1.1, que no sé si será ahora en 2 semanas o en Season 2.
Changes that occur within the patch that may change, whether it's the meta or the balance of specific things. There's been questions related
Estas es un nivel de alijo.
Respecs and how that has been pretty expensive on people's like their own personal economies with gold and so forth. I know we have respec changes that are also coming with the game itself. You guys probably know more specifics on the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, this really goes back. Joe was talking about our commitment to choice earlier, and it also, but I think it also goes back to, you know, when we say in the mission statement we want to have a wide variety of viable builds. Great, but if you can't switch between those builds, then
Dice, vale, queremos que haya más builds viables, pero si no puedes cambiar entre ellas, eso también genera un problema.
Quite by about 40%, quite a bit.
Yeah, so it should help
Y que van a reducir un 40% del coste de reiniciar la build.
They do have to adjust over to another build. They get the option of actually being able to do so, or have an easier option of being able to.
Entonces van a hacer más casual, más barato hacer los cambios de build.
And then I know, lastly, like
bien, segunda mejora buena.
As players kind of progress through the game, and the leveling curve kind of goes through, especially like post like 70 or so. We've been looking at you know, the player journey and how they've been getting up to 100.
Dice, a partir de nivel 70 hasta llegar a nivel 100, como el tema de la curva del leveo y demás, la curva del journey, del viaje del jugador.
Leveling from 50 to 100 faster by adjusting XP.
Dice, vamos a intentar que de nivel 50 a 100 se pueda subir mucho más deprisa, ajustando la experiencia de los sigilos.
Talking earlier about the change we made. Obviously, we also made the change to XP gain when fighting creatures above your level, and I failed to mention this discussing it.
Yeah.
So the original intent for that was we found players basically sitting at like fighting creatures like 3 levels above them and never felt like they were really challenging themselves.
Originalmente lo que hacíamos era que si te peleabas con bichos 3 niveles más que tú, te daba una extra experiencia.
And we knew that density changes were coming online, so we thought about this a little bit. But you know, I read a lot of feedback, like afterwards in particular, that just made it sound like people thought that we were just trying to make the game take longer, which wasn't actually the goal, but realized that the 25% to 15% change did constitute a nerf.
Dice, claro, es que este cambio de 25% más por 3 niveles a 15 por 10 niveles parece un nerfeo y parece algo artificial para que el juego dure más.
So we are looking to like really to readjust the XP rates for those areas. Because we aren't looking to like have you hit this absolute brick wall when you hit like level 70 or something, right? Like there's not like these moments where you're going to feel like you just can't.
Dice, no queremos que os quedéis estancados, que lleguéis a nivel 70 y tengáis la sensación de estar estancado. Queremos que realmente haya una forma natural, dinámica, de seguir subiendo de nivel. Entonces quieren reajustar la experiencia para que realmente tengas un sitio donde coger y decir, voy a subir 3 niveles y lo hagas.
So these are like we are making changes in this regard to kind of bring this down.
And I mean, you've seen, certainly we did things like increase the XP bonus for Nightmare Dungeons a while back quite substantially.
Dice, hemos incrementado la experiencia de la Nightmare Dungeon. Vamos a aumentar también la densidad de la Nightmare Dungeon. Hay cosas que podemos hacer.
Related to addressing, you know, the power leveling case, because we don't have like group up, have fun with your friends, like power leveling each other. The only case that we think is not very fun is the case where one person is standing at the entrance to.
Dice, claro, no nos molesta lo de que os estéis power leveando entre vosotros, lo de que cogéis, montéis una parte y os ayudéis unos a otros y os power leveéis. Es que creemos que lo de que una persona se quede AFK en la puerta y el resto lo leven no es divertido. Y eso es lo que queremos cargarnos.
We think that additional changes need to be made to make the game faster, especially between 50 and 100.
Yeah, we want level 1 to 100 to feel like an achievement, but not like a job. Right?
Dice, queremos que el nivel 100 sea como un logro, pero no un trabajo.
Very achievable, obviously, within the season timeline. But yeah, so we are going to make some adjustments. We talked about, I think.
Vamos a hacer ajustes para que se pueda alcanzar, sea un reto, pero no sea un trabajo. Va a hacer el nivel 100 mucho más accesible.
All the details of the changes, including the barb and like sorcerer changes that Joe had mentioned, along with other changes that we are preparing right now for the patch itself. That patch itself is supposed to be hitting in the next couple of weeks. Obviously,
el parche va a venir en 2 semanas. La semana que viene lo vamos a comentar.
For after that stream, so but we did want to make sure that we got in front of players to actually talk.
Dice, pero sí, el viernes que viene nos vamos a poner delante de los jugadores para hablar con ellos sobre todo esto y contarlo. Y vamos a sentarnos aquí a explicaros para que tengáis idea de lo que viene, lo discutamos, lo comentemos.
I know one big question that has always kind of
Y vamos a coger preguntas del chat.
Leaderboards and so forth.
Primera pregunta, leaderboard, ranking.
The expectation of when those might be coming in.
¿Cuándo van a salir? Ya lo dijeron, Season 2, Season 3.
We're aiming for Season 3 for the leaderboards in itself. I don't know if you guys have any like additional information or like additional insight onto those from your end.
Yeah, so one thing that's really important to us for leaderboards in Diablo 4 is that we don't think that like tying this directly to Nightmare Dungeons or content type exactly like that is going to make a lot of sense because the variety of the nature of the system.
El problema es que por cómo funciona el sistema no tenemos muy claro qué supone el ranking. ¿Quién ha hecho la más alta? ¿Quién la ha hecho menos tiempo?
But that is content that we are actively in development on and are excited to try to get ready for Season 3.
Y que lo vamos a tener en Season 3, dentro de 7 meses.
I'm sorry, the short answer to this is, yeah, so we excited about our competitive feature. We are making a specific content type that goes alongside that you're judging yourself against, and we're looking for Season 3 for that.
Season 3, para enero.
You stupid walrus. Is Uber Uniques, what's the future?
Uber Uniques.
Mathematically don't exist, so I don't think
matemáticamente no existen. ¿Qué hacemos con esto?
Sorry, I was really distracted by the walrus.
Okay.
Can you read the question again?
Uber Uniques.
Oh, right.
What's the future? They mathematically don't exist.
Dice Uber Únicos, matemáticamente no existen. ¿Qué va a pasar con ellos? ¿Van a seguir siendo inexistentes?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, you know, Uber Uniques are designed in such a way that they are a huge spike of power, and we're receiving feedback, and we understand the feedback on some of them. But they represent a huge spike of power, and as such, are not expected to be part of builds necessarily.
Dice, a ver, son un montón de poder. No son necesarios. No queremos que sintáis que son necesarios para ninguna build.
From the ground up, we kind of made the decision to say it is okay if we want players to find these. But we don't want them to expect to find these.
Queremos que los jugadores lo puedan conseguir, pero no que esperen conseguirlo.
Now, right now, I believe that they are exceedingly rare, and we do want them to feel very, very rare. But I suspect that as we start moving into future seasons, we do want to find more ways for players, or more opportunities for players to get chances at these.
Dice, queremos para futuras temporadas, no para esta, buscar alternativas para que los jugadores puedan conseguirlos, pero que sean estúpidamente raros, que si te cae sea como que te pueda caer, pero que no sea una cosa que puedas esperar. Y van a hacerlo un pelín más común, pero sin pasarse.
If there's any plans or ways that we're looking at addressing crowd control here in the future.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier in the stream, or well, I think we both talked about it. We think that when you have high density of monsters on screen and you have a lot of elites, the crowd control, the tools that you have for crowd control are not, need to be better, basically. And some of that is going to be adjustments to things that feel unfair.
Dice, control de masas. Si aumentamos la densidad y en pantalla pronto tienes un montón más de enemigos y un montón más de élites, las herramientas de control de masas que tienes ahora mismo no van a ser buenas y tienen que ser mejores. Es algo en lo que vamos a hablar más adelante, pero tenemos que mejorar la capacidad que tiene el jugador a responder al control de masas. Pero futuro.
Recoat. I tried. I'm so bad with names. I'm sorry. When will loadouts be added?
Yeah, it's a feature that the UI team is very excited about. It's something we've talked about a bit internally. We don't have a timeline for the idea of loadouts just yet, but it is something that we're continuing to actively talk about. When we have more information to share in terms of like when something like this could potentially be added to Diablo 4, I'm sure that we'll talk about it. Barag Zero says, what is the time frame on 111? It doesn't seem very clear. Is it before the middle of the season?
Dice, el parche 1.1.1 que viene a mitad de temporada, finales. ¿Cuándo viene?
It is much sooner than mid-season. As I said, it's only like a couple.
El 1.1.1 viene en 2 semanas y viene con un alijo extra.
Very, very soon. Like if we're doing a stream on Friday, I would expect it within.
En 2 semanas, gente.
We have to provide some. If we say anything too specific today, production will choke us out. So we have to be very careful about the language we use. But yes, very soon.
Only because with patches themselves, of course, you know, there are, we're on a lot of different platforms and everything, and of course those go through certification. If a certification gets pushed back or whatnot, then we obviously need to readjust schedules, so it's hard for us to actually put a specific timeline until that actually occurs. But very, very soon. BulbB79, are there any plans for some changes for experience between, say, level 75 to 100? This is actually something that we just commented on, but the journey feels a bit dull. There are several events, but only nightmare dungeons to provide challenge. World bosses, Helltides, and Whispers are a good idea, but just too easy.
Yeah, there's so we talked about, so I guess
Sí, lo de va a haber algún cambio en el recorrido de nivel 50 a 100, que parece solo tenemos mareas de sangre, dungeons y bosses. Y la respuesta es que sí, que están buscando hacer más cosas, que haya más alternativas de endgame.
Do we feel that there are the right number of like milestones for players to engage with, enough goals to kind of like consume while you're also just leveling up, enough content to kind of do as you're leveling up in these role tiers? And I think that the answer is no, that we know that there's more things that we need to add to the game, particularly for World Tier 4.
Dice, lo único que hace falta es más niveles de mundo y volver a meter más rangos de dificultad. Dice que no, que es mucho más complejo, que tienen que meter más cosas, algo más que no solo tiers, y que lo están pensando. Y que para Season 2, Season 3 están pensando en varios cambios para que el endgame sea un poquito más interesante.
Hodoc24 says, what are your plans to adjust loot drops? This, I'm going to add on to his question after I read it. It feels very frustrating to grind for days without ever seeing anything close to an upgrade or finding the right aspect. Even worse, when you finally do it and it's a terrible roll. Slightly, I'm also going to modify that and mention target farming.
Sí. Dice, a ver, necesito target farming. Es una putada cuando estoy buscando un aspecto en concreto, me cae y tiene un rol de mierda. No solo que por fin me ha caído, sino que como tiene un rol de mierda no me sirve. ¿Cómo lo farmeo?
And particularly when you're in World Tiers 3 and 4, where you start dealing with sacred items and ancestral items, where you're kind of dealing with this larger bucket of eye power range, this can certainly tend to be true. Unless you're looking for specific kinds of affixes, you're looking for particular kinds of roles, right? So there's a couple things. One, we know we want to try to reduce the difficulty of like kind of comparing and looking at a number of different items all at once and trying to get a better sense of that. These are things the UI team is very passionate about, and conversations are ongoing.
Y están pensando, hablando y charlando sobre a lo mejor algunos ítems reducir los rangos de los ítems porque es complicado sacarlo perfecto.
Particularly in World Tier 4, while you're leveling up there. And the systems team has ideas on things they would like to include. It's too early for us to say exactly.
Es muy pronto para comentarlo, pero estamos barajando ideas para que en Mundo 4 tengáis ideas para tener cierta sensación de progresión y que sea algo mucho más dinámico. Que las upgrades que le metáis al equipo sea algo mucho más dinámico.
So, legendary aspects are a place I think that we can afford to do more. We know that players are looking for certain aspects. They're trying to find certain things. They're trying to find particularly unique items. I think is often the case.
Y sabemos que los jugadores quieren alguna manera de poder farmear los legendarios o los únicos.
We have plans in Season 2 right now to have more content you can try to target farm in order to find certain
Vale,
items.
Y que en Season 2 vamos a meter alternativas de contenido para tener un target de farming. Para poder apuntar a qué quieres farmear. Una forma más fácil de conseguir los aspectos que estés buscando o el único concreto. Es algo que hasta dentro de 4 meses no vamos a leer.
Yeah, and I do want to note, like, I know we have an update here coming.
Van a casualizar.
Which we just talked about is in the next couple of weeks. There are going to be other patches before Season 2 and so forth, with additional changes and items that we just haven't noted, and I just want to clarify specifically on that. We do have more patches beyond 1.1.1 before Season 2 to address a lot of feedback that we're receiving.
Dice que habrá más cambios antes de la Season 1, en el parche 1.1.1, que habrá legendarios, que habrá cosas, que tranquilos, pero que además la Season 2 va a venir con todo su contenido. Y vuelven a preguntar por el social. Tengo problemas para juntarme con gente, para hacer una party, para dar con con formas de hacer un equipo. Necesito un sistema social. Dice que sí, que lo están estudiando, que lo están pensando, pero que no tienen un momento exacto en el que vayan a lanzar las herramientas sociales que aún no están listas.
Andy for Man was the last question. Bean Pot 10 says, are there going to be changes with armor regarding survivability? Hardcore is almost unplayable on Sorcerer. With one shots from corpse bows and low.
Dice, ¿algún tipo de cambio para el tema de la armadura y demás? El mago es injugable en hardcore. Cualquier tipo de explosión de cadáveres o lo que sea te mata.
The changes that Joe is talking about for that we'll be talking about in more detail next week.
Dice que la semana que viene en el parche 1.1.1 lo van a hablar, porque ahora mismo el mago está injugable en hardcore.
We also identified there are a few outstanding monster types and abilities that are doing that are killing players a little more frequently than we expect.
Dice, hemos encontrado varias tipologías de enemigos y mecánicas de bichos que van a los jugadores con más frecuencia de la que nosotros queríamos.
Creatures that can chill, claim an awful lot of lives, right?
Or charging creatures, we've also learned.
And charging
personajes con carga, personajes con close gap.
Which I think have been nerfed like twice now.
Well, there was.
Dice que los bichos con carga los han nerfeado ya 2 veces.
On the beast charge in particular, where beast charge could deal damage. Even if you interrupted the charge or the beast died.
Dices que claro, aunque el bicho muera o le interrumpa la carga te hace el daño igual.
I mean, we're identifying some of these like really difficult affixes, really difficult Nightmare Dungeon affixes, or like really ones that claim lots, like a disproportionate amount of player lives as part of that. And we're looking at those all at once. It's Sorcerer survivability is absolutely an issue, and we're going to be talking about it.
Dice sí, es un problema en las habilidades de supervivencia del mago. En eso estoy 100% de acuerdo.
But there's also this idea of like there's a lot of things out there that are just doing a lot of.
Pero además hay determinados afijos de dungeons, de Nightmare Dungeons, que no son justos y que los vamos a... que son que salta y está muerto. Y que van a ver de qué manera lo regulan, que lo están valorando.
We don't want the game to be easy. We don't want you to be able to walk through every encounter. And we want the game to feel deadly at times. We want you to feel like you have an opportunity to kind of evade or deal with it.
Claro, queremos que tengáis un juego en el que creáis que tenéis oportunidad de jugar lo que queráis y como queráis.
DNA says we'll be seeing the hotfix notes before the hotfix comes out today. Yeah, we'll get the notes up. The deployment hasn't.
¿Podemos leer las notas del parche de hoy antes de que salga el parche de hoy? Han dicho que sí, que las vamos a tener esta misma noche. Van a poner las notas del parche, del hotfix de esta noche. Van a fixear las Nightmare Dungeon y los ítems, gente, hoy.
Templar Knights asks, question, can we change the codex in such a way that we can upgrade the values with founded legendary items? This could reduce the demand to stash, avoid aspects laying around, easier adopting player to your balance changes, but we still want to find items.
Sería un buen quality online.
Sí.
Yeah, so we know that one of the key things that players are carrying in their stash right now are lots and lots of aspects.
Yeah.
Dice, claro, tenemos un problema y es los putos aspectos. Si pudiéramos tener un aspecto de cada lo que necesitamos maxeado, fin del problema. Pero ahora tengo el aspecto de 80% perfecto, luego 85, luego 90. Dice, claro, ahora mismo los stats están llenos de aspectos. Y dice que lo van a solucionar de una forma muy sencilla, te dan un nivel material y a correr. No ha contestado la pregunta.
How much fun is it to be able to extract an aspect from an item and be able to maintain that role? And then how much is that fun so fun that it's worth like some of the inventory pressure that comes about as a result of that? And that's a conversation we've had within the dev team. We're going to continue to talk about it, but we know
porque en Diablo 3 el QE canal era un rol perfecto.
We can make to the Codex of Power, for example, to kind of like be embracing some of these other like affix extraction systems.
Question from DRJ16. Has the team considered how certain nerfs like weapon cooldown reduction are so much more impactful for certain classes than others?
Dice, y el tema de poder usar cooldown reducción en las armas tiene muchísimo más impacto en unas clases que en otras.
Like, you know, the vulnerable damage change disproportionately affecting
like
cold sorks. Yeah, there is we're definitely aware that some of these changes disproportionately affect some classes.
Porque al mago, por ejemplo, le han quitado que la mano izquierda pueda poner reducción de tiempos.
Earlier point about when we're going to be making changes like
que ese cambio solo me putea a mí como mago.
We're going to have this have an overall effect of reducing certain effects down, or rather reducing certain like powers or affixes or whatever it is down to a place where we want people to use the baseline to kind of build from for other parts of the game. That when we do those things, it's going to affect these different players in different ways, and they're not going to enjoy that if we if we've ruined their build in order to try to weed the garden and get things into a better place. Like ultimately, we're going to be trying to do a lot more situations where if we're going to take a thing away, if we're going to update something, where it's no longer going to be as valuable as part of your build, we want to provide a lot of other options as part of that. Yeah. Make sure we don't leave the build with a gaping like giant hole in it as a result of the change that we made. So this is going to, again, it's going to mean that moving forward when we're making like larger scale balance and tuning adjustments, we're going to do those a little bit more slowly as a result, in order to make sure that we're embracing all of these other like components to give a lot of options all at once when we make a change.
Dice que lo que quieren no es realmente cargarse de determinados personajes o que de pronto con el cambio digas este personaje ya no sirve, sino que lo que quieren es darte opciones y que eso es entre comillas relativamente sencillo. Si quitarle tantísima reducción de cooldown hace que el ítem ya no sea tan bueno porque necesitas sí o sí el cooldown por el personaje, a lo mejor el error está en la habilidad. Le metes el personaje en la reducción de cooldown y ahora tienes un montón de alternativas en cuanto a las armas.
We'll continue to evaluate that change. It's a fairly small difference. I know that in
pero no lo van a hacer.
ARPG, small amounts of time can be meaningful. We did add the reset dungeon button back in. It does require that you're outside
el tema de reiniciar las dungeons. ¿Qué pasa con el tema de reiniciar las dungeons? Hemos vuelto a poner el botón de reiniciar las dungeons, sabemos por qué se quitó, lo hemos vuelto a poner porque era mucho más cómodo que lo de estar saliendo a menos y tal.
The feeling is they feel like they want more items per season that are actually added in.
Han devuelto el botón, gente.
Yeah, we've always said that we wanted to take in the feedback from the players as we kind of got these seasons out the door. So season 1, we add the 32 Malignant Hearts, which I think have been pretty cool. We're going to be looking at the balance, some of them to kind of like lift them up, make them a little more exciting in some places. But broadly, we're pretty happy. They generally are. And then we have our uniques and our legendary items that we added with the season as well. I think if we see that there's like a lot of interest in trying to get more of these, we can start trying to think about how we can inject a few more legendaries into the game with each season, a couple more uniques potentially in the game with each season. But we want to continue to see like kind of what the feedback looks like. This is a good example of people asking for more. So yeah, good to know.
Separately from that, like, are you guys looking at potentially like reworking or redoing some things?
So that means patch 1.1.1 is kind of in that vein of trying to like get these things into a slightly better place. And we do want to go back over our existing legendary power library and identify the ones where they can afford to be lifted up with redesigns.
Dice, ¿estáis pensando en reworkar o rediseñar algo? Juego recién salido, ¿eh? Dice, sí, el parche 1.1.1 va a revisar algunos de los legendarios que no terminan de funcionar y no es solo una cuestión de cambiar valores, algunos de ellos van a ser reworkeados o pueden ser reworkeados. Dice, tenemos la posibilidad de hacer nuevos legendarios, pero también tenemos la opción de coger algunos que no han terminado de funcionar y modificarlos.
Question from Panda Mousy and Mormra. Same question, actually. What's your plan for resistances? Right now they feel like a wasted stat.
¿Cuál es vuestro plan para las resistencias que ahora mismo son un stat muerto? ¿Cuándo? Más bien.
Resistances fall in one of those categories where if we need to make a change to the way that resistance damage is, or rather, the way that players use resistance to mitigate damage from certain sources. And it's going to be a far-reaching change when we actually go through.
Es un cambio a largo plazo porque es complicado aplicar esto. Queremos que funcione, ahora mismo estamos gastando la fuerza de trabajo en otras cosas más importantes, pero llegará. Más bien para Season 2-3.
Shadow Mun, sorry. Can campaign bosses be added to the pool of dungeon bosses that we encounter? I feel like campaign bosses are underutilized.
Los bosses de campaña tienen... Tal cual. Os habéis currado los bosses de campaña, están guays, molan, pero ahora mismo son como que están poco utilizados. Los bosses de campaña ahora mismo no sirven para absolutamente nada. ¿Y planeáis incorporarlos al endgame? Y ha dicho que sí, que tienen ideas con ellos. Y que quieren encontrar la forma correcta de coger esos bosses y darles un buen uso.
This is actually a question. Party Cannon 30. Hi there, guys. Can you? Thanks for the information. My question is about crashes on PlayStation 5. Is that a known issue? We are aware of.
Si tengo problemas, me crashea en PlayStation 5. ¿Me lo explicas?
Consoles, specifically Xbox, PlayStation.
Ya he dicho que Xbox y PlayStation tienen un parche de mantenimiento específico explico para que no haya
I
caídas.
do want to note, like, I know with 1.10, there was a bug fix towards a specific memory leak that the team was trying to identify and find, and they actually did find it.
Había un error con el tema de las memorias de las consolas y han encontrado el error y que lo van a parchear para el 1.1.1 dentro de 2 semanas. ¡Hijo de puta! A tomar por culo el mosquito. Te cace, cabrón. Buah, llevo un rato comiéndome.
Still actively, troubleshooting and figuring out like specific situations that players might be running into. Of course, if you have like more information on those, please consult bugs on our forums and give as much information as possible, because a lot of those repro steps on our side are sometimes really difficult, and it helps our teams out, helps our QA teams out to be able to see if they can actually repro the same type of issues that players are having. Do you guys plan on introducing more ways? I'm sorry, this is Mr. I don't want to butcher that.
Okay.
Do you guys plan on introducing more craft slash modify gear? Currently, only gold has value, and only 1 stack can be rolled.
More ways to craft and modify gear.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sí.
Yes.
Va a haber más formas de craftear el equipo, de modificarlo.
The items they're getting. What we have really in like the preseason and now the season 1 stage is still very like a baseline experience in terms of item modification. We are looking at more opportunities in the future to allow players to do more with their items.
Dice, os hemos dado como una base para empezar a modificar los ítems y sí, en futuros parches vienen más formas de rehacer o de craftear ítems.
Why do they take ability slots? It could be easily a different button. How many of Necrominion builds have beat Uber Lilith? Lots of questions about, is there, we already answered the drop rates for uniques and so
Vamos, Adam, céntrate.
But I guess the question mostly is about Necromancer minions and ability slots. Also, I saw other questions related to companions.
Habilidades de minion del Necromancer. Ya tanto como que no sirve como el propio Necro. Cambio tanto el hecho de poder llevar las habilidades de minion sin tener que ocuparte un hueco de habilidad de personaje, como el hecho de la propia utilidad de la build.
Yeah, we care about a lot of things, but go on.
What I was just trying to get to another point, which is there's some really cool stuff in some of the Malignant Hearts that affects this, in terms of like kind of getting credit for additional abilities.
Yeah.
And we do care a lot about the number of the sort of like ratio of ability to number of slots that it takes up, and making that as optimal as possible.
Yeah, that's right. We want to make sure that if you're going to play a Necromancer and you're going to summon skeletons, that you are going to be. I mean, that takes up that's the weight of an ability. Like it's the same as having an active. You need to like playing with it.
Dice, si juegas Necro y vas a invocar bichos, es como una activa más, y por eso ocupa un hueco de habilidad. La habilidad es que sacrifiques slot de skill porque necesitas llevar esos bichos.
The viability of like minion builds at various parts of the game, there are some builds that are able to like get pretty deep into content, obviously, but I think there's still room for improvement in terms of like minion survivability and other conversations along those lines.
En cuanto a la viabilidad de los minions, hay algunas builds que han llegado bastante lejos.
The question about druid companions, right?
Yeah, kind of similar to Necromancer minions, and people were asking like, can that ever be a viable thing?
Y podrán ser viables.
Actually, there are a few players that run like literally all 3 companion skills and use that as part of the build that they'll go after for their druid.
Dice, hay algunos jugadores que han conseguido hacer high-end con builds de minion.
Whether it rises to the full level of like a complete like spec, I think is going to be interesting. But I know that there's people on the team that are very excited about trying to explore more of this side of the druid over time. But we don't have there aren't as many interconnecting points for the way that you interact with your companions right now, and the way that like the skeleton army does for the Necromancer, in terms of ways that you modify them and do more with them. So I think there's some groundwork we need to do to like provide a lot more options there. But something that's
pero ahora mismo no tenemos la posibilidad de darle más opciones al Necro para interactuar con los minions y hacerlos más potentes. Como que ahora mismo no hay mucha diversidad dentro del Necro Minion y puede hacer poquito.
I think we loved how many, D3 has like all kinds of goblins. There's like 10 different kinds of goblins, or 14 maybe. It's been a little while since I looked at that. data in the editor. But we think that there's lots of room for there to be more fun goblin types.
¿Tenéis planes de meter más tipos de goblins? Sí, tenemos planes de hacerlo, pero a futuro.
We actually had a conversation with the lead designer last week talking about this. We are buffing like legendary drop chance, for example, from items that will appear from treasure goblins. We do want them to.
Dice, vamos a bufar al goblin actual. Tuve la semana pasada una charla con el equipo de desarrollo y vamos a bufar al goblin actual. Y además estamos pensando en nuevos tipos de goblins.
We've been hearing a lot of feedback regarding the patch, and we're telling you guys now that we completely hear you loud and clear. We don't plan on doing patches like this ever again, where we're not going to be essentially removing the fun in the player power.
Dice, a ver, este parche ha sido como quitarle la gracia al juego. No planteamos volver a hacer un parche tan brusco como este. No nos vamos a cargar ninguna clase en particular, ni... Vamos a boostear, vamos a potenciar mecánicas muertas. Vamos a intentar daros alternativas para jugar, pero lo de hacer un borrado genérico del poder del juego, no.
Again, what we're saying now is that we will be getting patch notes in front of the community way earlier in advance, whether through a Campfire chat or through like a...
En vez de hacerlo como esta vez, vamos a hacer un Campfire, vamos a explicaros las notas, vamos a explicaros el parche y una semana o dos después, entonces tendréis el parche. Vamos a ser mucho más transparentes, incluso lo vamos a explicar antes de... para recibir el feedback y hacer ajustes.
Really affected a lot of the response from you guys, and I think if we just provided that over to everyone and gave a little bit more of a heads up, I think it would have helped a whole lot there from that specific situation.
Well, yeah, keeping in mind. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that's absolutely one part of it, and you were talking about it in a more full way, but I want to really make sure I hit on like one of the really great points of feedback that we've been seeing is like, why can you nerf things today and then buff things far in the future, right? And so what we're saying is, not only is there a change to communication, but we're also going to pair changes like that together, so that we don't have exactly the situation that players have called out as unfair.
Yep, most definitely. And of course, with 111 coming really soon, we are committing to another Campfire chat next week.
Sí.
Next Friday.
La semana que viene parche, comentamos el parche, lo desarrollamos
we'll end up posting about the details over the next week.
Y os daremos los detalles la próxima semana.
And there we'll actually go through all the changes that we just talked about here into greater detail. Joe, I know, will end up providing greater detail changes on like the barbarian and sorcerer adjustments that we're going to be making.
Ajustes para bárbaro y mago.
And then, of course, we'll also be talking about just essentially everything in the patch notes.
Ya hablar de todo el parche.
Patch 111 will be coming out in a couple weeks. With us having a stream next Friday, I anticipate it being very soon or shortly after the stream specifically. So, and again, we do have a hotfix today that we will be rolling out this afternoon. We'll be having notes related to that hotfix here.
Y hoy tenemos un parche de unas notas de parche del hotfix que viene hoy. Con cambios a la Nightmare Dungeon.
Thank you guys for the feedback. We most definitely hear you loud and clear. It's something that we wanted to address, and it's something very important for the team here, for us to actually address the community and talk to you guys more about it, and also change some of the ways that we were doing specific items or specific processes. So we really do appreciate the feedback. Of course, continue providing.
Nada, hombre, solo faltaba.
It's really important for the game itself and for us to make a better experience for the players out there. So, thank you guys again for tuning in. We'll see you next Friday for the next Campfire chat.
Pequeño detalle para el chat. Nos parece un poco mal que a la hora de tener que dar la cara por un mal parche solo haya 3 tíos. Sé que a nadie le gusta cojear de este palo, pero es que la encargada de balance es una tía. Una necro, concretamente. Me habría gustado que esa tía me explicara el porqué del balance. Vale que estos dos son los directores de proyecto y demás, pero, joder, me habría gustado que ella nos explicara el porqué del balance que, a priori, tengo entendido que en buena medida pensaba ella. Sin más, ¿eh? Listo, pues ya lo tenemos.